Hello and welcome to the Inspiring Case for Support webinar. My name is Susan Snozzy and I am with Research Development Operations and Collaborative Services, otherwise known as Club RD. We have been doing these webinars every week for a few weeks now, and if you're just joining us for the first time, thank you so much for being here. We'll have a webinar most every Monday through November, with the exception of Thanksgiving and Labor Day weeks, of course. And hope that you'll be able to join us for those topics that seem important or relevant to you. And this is certainly a great one to join us for, the case for support. So for starters, what is a case for support? We hear people kind of use this term, what's their case for support? Do you have a case for support? But we may not necessarily know exactly what that refers to. So let's start there. The case for support, or the case statement, is a compelling statement that demonstrates the needs of youth in your community, how Boys and Girls Club programs impact that need, and the results that you achieve. It outlines your mission and vision, where you've been, where you are, where you are going, and what it will take to get there. That sounds fantastic, right? And it sounds like something that a donor would want if they were going to invest in your club. So let's talk a little bit about how to put together a case for support, why the case is important, and how you can have a great case for support for your club. Here's a much simpler definition of the case for support according to the Association of Fundraising Professionals Dictionary. The case for support includes the reasons why an organization both needs and merits philanthropic support. So why should I have a case for support? The case for support is a go-to document for planning, resource development, training, and marketing. So it isn't just a fundraising document. You'll use your case for support language consistently across all of your messaging. The case communicates why donors should make a gift to your club. So really think of this as a persuasive document. This isn't going to talk about we need, but instead what you do. There are two different kinds of case for support. There's the internal and the external case for support. Today we're going to talk about the external case for support. That is to say, it is the case for support that is shared with an audience outside of the club. The internal case is much longer, and it contains many of your strategic planning documents, other things like that an outside community member, donor, or investor would not need to see. The external case is a starting point, and it's the only document in terms of your cases for support that donors are going to see. Even though it's an absolutely vital document, lots of clubs don't have one. When I was working on this webinar, I started reaching out to clubs and saying, hey, could I have a copy of your case for support to share with everyone who comes to this webinar? And clubs of all types, large and small, said, we don't really have one. Or we have one, but we're not totally happy with it. So how about you see what you get and send it to us? So it's a really important document, but interestingly, it's not one that we're seeing people always complete. So a little more distinction between the internal and external case. Your internal case is like a briefcase where you pull together source documentation for pertinent organizational information. You certainly should have an internal case for support to guide your club, but that's a much longer process that we're not going to talk about today. Your first step would be that external case for support. I love this quote about the case for support. A case for support is quite simply the most important document your organization will ever write, says the Corporation for National and Community Service. When you think about how many nonprofit organizations there are out there competing for your donors' time, money, and interest, the case for support as a wonderful, persuasive document that shows why you merit and need philanthropic support plays a vital role in helping your donors to understand why they should invest in what you're doing as opposed to what someone else is doing. And of course, everyone on this webinar knows the work we do in Boys and Girls Clubs is more important, more transformational, more life-changing than the work of any other nonprofit in the nation. So we need a good way to articulate that. So let's talk about how to write your case for support. At this point, you might be thinking, I need to write a bunch of this down. We're going through so many slides and so much information. And so I just wanted to let you know that there are handouts you'll be able to download after the webinar, which include PDF of the slides that we're talking about today, so you don't need to write everything down, a sample case for support, a document about how to write your case for support, a document about how to use research and where to find research, and an assessment scale. So there will be plenty of things for you to use when you're working on your case for support. So right now you can kind of sit back and just listen, and if you need to take notes to help you out, that's great, but don't feel like you have to. First, don't exceed more than one double-sided page, if at all possible, when writing your case for support. You want to be sure that it gets read, and the longer the document is, the less chance there is that your donors are going to really give it a thorough read. Next, if at all possible, be very specific to your community and your club. Nationwide statistics are great, but if I'm a donor and I want to invest locally, I would be more persuaded by local statistics. Of course, if it's not possible for you to find those local statistics, you can certainly use nationwide statistics, and BGCA has some wonderful statistics that we've provided in our Great Futures campaign materials. But whenever possible, bring it down as local as you can. Certainly, you'll be able to find state and regional data. Focus on a critical community need in your case for support. I see we have a question, so I'm going to go ahead and take that real quick here. Should we add motivational pictures? You know, once you're laying out your case for support, a lot of clubs have done some really neat stuff with adding photos of their kids and things like that. And I think that's a great way to make the case a little bit more interesting. The examples that you'll get today are just text, but lots of clubs have done some really nice looking cases for support that may have some pie graphs, some bar graphs, photos of the kids. So I think if you can, go for it. If you do not have the resources to have photos taken of your kids, if you go to marketing.bgca.org, again, marketing.bgca.org, you will find a whole slew of really high quality photos of kids of all different ages, races, ethnicities that you can use in your materials. Of course, it's nice to use local kids, but you may not be able to get those really high quality photos taken, and that's just fine too. Yes, you will have access to this PowerPoint after the webinar, so no worries. Thanks for asking. So we were talking about focusing on a critical community need or multiple critical community needs in your case for support. So for example, if your community has a pretty serious problem with juvenile crime and gangs, what you would do in your case for support is start by talking about that problem. There are this many gangs in our metro area. Juvenile crime is at this certain percentage. But at the Boys and Girls Club, kids are off the street. Kids learn how to learn positive role modeling. Kids have something to do. Kids learn good citizenship. Another example of focusing on a critical community need, if you knew that there was a childhood obesity epidemic in your community, as there is nationwide, you could talk about your Healthy Meals program, your Healthy Lifestyles program. You could talk about your kids' access to healthy snacks. You could talk about the number of sports they were able to play as a solution to that community need. So you're sort of presenting a need and addressing that need. You want to share your club's program outcomes in your case for support. We're going to talk about all of these a little bit more in turn. Center on how you are making a difference in your community. And ask for the donor support. Sometimes a case for support will really do a good job of laying out what the club is doing, but it won't get to the important aspect, how can I as the donor help? So the first section of your case for support is going to describe who you are. Broadly, what's your mission and vision? You might talk about your club site locations, important statistics about your members, and your average daily attendance. So you would say the Boys and Girls Club of XYZ community has 3 locations in this area, and this area. We serve 1,000 kids every day, ages 6 to 18, with programs such as these. We serve this many kids each day. Try to avoid using the kind of jargon that we would use internally, like ADA, and instead say we serve this many kids each day. Be sure that you're using language the donor can understand and identify with. Sometimes we get pretty jargony at BGCA and at the Boys and Girls Clubs. So the first section is really just helping your donor to understand who you are. And I know everyone on this webinar has had that experience where a donor is talking to you or a community member is visiting the club and they say, "We didn't know you did all this. We thought this was just a place where kids went for daycare or to play basketball." But we know that what we're doing at the club is so much more than that. In the next section, you're going to focus on your community's most urgent needs. Here, these will cluster around BGCA's impact areas: academic success, character and citizenship, and healthy lifestyles. And under each one, I've just put a couple of examples of the kinds of community urgent needs that you might talk about, because these are the kinds of community needs that we address. So if your community has a low graduation rate, you would want to focus on that. Focus on how this is a problem for the kids of your community and it impedes their success. And then talk about the graduation rates of your kids. Your NYOI data is going to tell you how many of your kids are on track to graduate. In character and citizenship, there are a myriad of issues that face kids that we're addressing through character and citizenship program at local clubs. And then, of course, healthy lifestyles as well. So once you've really brought out this problem using local statistics, you're now going to help to explain what the return on investment is for the donors. So if you've talked about hunger, you're going to explain how your meals program alleviates hunger. How many meals did you serve last year? If you've talked about academic success, you're going to talk about the grades of your kids, the number of hours they're doing homework. So share program data and outcomes data. Very important. Tell stories about the kids. Give us a little something to tug at the heartstrings. You can offer testimonials from kids, parents, teachers that might be saying the change they've seen in the kids in their classroom who are club members. Don't share what you do. Share what you achieve. And that sentence, I hope, will keep you really outcomes focused. So don't tell us that you have a character and citizenship program. Tell us that all of the kids in your Keystone Club graduated on time last year. Don't tell us that you have a great program called Passport to Manhood. Tell us that the majority of the kids in your Passport to Manhood program are abstaining from drugs and alcohol. So you can see the difference. One is really impact-based, and that to me as a donor is a great return on investment. When I invest in the club, what I get from my money is fewer kids on drugs. When I invest in the club, what I get are fewer kids in gangs. The last section, this is where you're going to ask the donor for help. Here you would ask for their consideration of a gift. Most of the time you'll be seeking unrestricted operating support, like in your annual campaign. Of course, you could tailor your case for support if you had a capital campaign going or you had a particular project. If you're asking for unrestricted operating support, ask for supportive programs such as these or like these that I've just mentioned. That way your donor doesn't get the idea that their dollars are being specifically earmarked to a specific program unless that's something they're asking for. That just gives you more flexibility in accounting. Now, of course, if a donor says, "I really want to support your Lego robotics program," of course you say, by all means. But if they don't specify, asking for supportive programs such as these or like these is going to give you the flexibility. And then offer campaign details. How much are you trying to raise? When are you trying to raise it by? What are you going to use it for? How much have you raised so far? This is a great time to mention that your staff and board are supporting you as well. If you're a visual person, I thought this might just be helpful to kind of visualize what happens in a case for support. And it starts up at about 11 o'clock and then goes all the way around clockwise, starting with who are you? What are your community's needs? What is the return on investment for the donor? Objectives for the campaign? And how the donor can help. So if your mind is kind of reeling, remember that there's going to be a really easy to follow guide for how to write this as well as an example afterwards. But really think of yourself as kind of doing problem solution. There are problems in our community. We address those problems. And then you just ask for an opportunity to support. So there are a lot of roles of the case for support in terms of resource development. Here are a few. Clarity for your campaign. This helps anyone who might be giving to you or soliciting to understand exactly what the goals of the campaign are, how much is being raised, and so forth. This can help you to develop talking points for your solicitors. So if you have board members going out to make asks on your behalf, having them understand your case for support will make it easier for them to develop their own talking points. You can use your case for support for solicitation materials. And so here is where we had the question a minute ago from I can't see your name. We had the question a minute ago about whether you could add motivational pictures. Once you're starting to use this to develop solicitation materials that you'll take out into the field, you bet. You can use your case for support, and you should use your case for support as you're developing your direct mail pieces as well. The idea here is you're using the same language over and over so that your audience is getting exposed to a consistent message from the club, and those are the things that they are starting to remember and repeat about your club. You start to be able to make that point really clearly. Next, you can use the case for support to develop an elevator speech, that 30-second spiel about what the club does that you could articulate to anyone, anytime, anywhere. That's going to come out of your case for support. A lot of times I can remember when I was meeting with donors and I'd have all my brochures and they looked great and I was so excited to share them, and they'd say, "Can you just leave me like an executive summary?" You bet, it's the case for support. It can be a great leave behind piece for busy people who don't want any bells and whistles. They just want to know what you're all about. The case for support, however, is not just for resource development. It's also a communications tool, a media and marketing tool, a training tool, a planning tool, a board tool, and an inspirational tool. So how does that work? Well, you should put your case for support in all of your media packets. You can send it out when you do press releases. You should give your case for support to all staff and volunteers when they're being trained, because they should know why you're worthy of support, even if they aren't frontline fundraisers. It's a planning tool. These are the things that we're addressing in our community. Are we on the right track? What else should we be looking at? It's a board tool, a great way to recruit board members, a great way to help board members understand what you do. And last of all, it's an inspirational tool. An inspirational tool, wait a minute. You just said I have to put statistics and data in there. True. Rational and logical arguments are extremely important, but we also need to be emotionally engaging to our donors. Remember that there is a ton of competition out there for our donors' dollars. And one of the great ways that we can manage to win them over to what we're doing is to engage them emotionally. A good case statement is logical. A great case statement will create passion. It is often said that donors give out of emotion and then justify the gift with logic. I would say that there are two different kinds of donors. Some are more emotionally compelled, some are more logically compelled. Some are looking for both. And so you want to have both of those in your case for support. For example, I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. This is one of the most famous quotations in American history, and it is because it is emotionally compelling. So what if Dr. King had instead said, "I have a strategic plan"? Nothing, right? We wouldn't be quoting that. It's boring. And yet, sometimes when we're meeting with donors and potential investors, that's exactly what we say. Well, we have a strategic plan, and here's our 5-year projection for. That's great. A little deeper into the conversation, or if your donor asks, but you don't want to lead with your strategic plan. You want to lead with something emotionally compelling and interesting. That's the case for support. So we're going to vote here in a minute. We have 2 different versions of sentences from cases for support. And we're just going to get a feel for who here is more of a logic person and who here is more of an emotional person. So here we go. Nationwide, more than 1 in 4 children are obese or overweight, dramatically increasing the risk of serious physical and emotional problems. At the Boys and Girls Club, we're combating childhood obesity crisis head on. With our emphasis on healthy lifestyles, kids learn about eating right. In fact, 73% of our members had at least 5 servings of fruits and vegetables every day. Okay, so the first one, 1 in 4 children are overweight or obese. 73% of our members are eating their fruits and vegetables. Here's number 2. 12-year-old Sam loves baseball. He knows every statistic and watches every game. Unfortunately, due to serious health conditions, including Asperger's syndrome, autism, and a heart condition, he can never play the game. But thanks to the Boys and Girls Club, Sam threw out the opening pitch at the Anytown Cubs game, and it went right over the plate. Okay, so that one's a little bit more emotional. So you have a little icon there that will let you raise your hand. And I would like to ask that you raise your hand if you preferred the first one. We'll wait just a minute in case anybody else is looking for the hand raising icon. Okay, so 25% of you said, I preferred the first one. That was the one that said there's a childhood obesity epidemic and we're combating it head on. I'll assume the other 75% preferred the second one. Your donors will have a similar kind of division. Some are going to want one kind of case, some will want the other. Put in both and you'll have something for everyone. We don't usually forget the data part, but we do often forget that more emotional part and adding stories about our kids. Who's more impressive than our kids? Who's more touching than our kids? We have so many wonderful stories of how the people on this webinar have changed the entire course of the future for young people. That is the kind of stuff that your donors need to hear about. I once heard someone say, use facts to tell, use stories to sell. And I thought, that's brilliant. It's going in my case for support webinar. So there it is. Use facts to tell. Use facts to tell what we do, to tell about problems. Use stories to then sell it, cement it in your donors' minds. I put together a little case for support self-assessment. So if you already have a case for support, you can use this to assess the case for support that you've been using. If you're putting together your first case for support, after it's finished, you can use this to decide whether it's the case for support that you want to be using. You might also pass this off to a colleague and ask them to critique you. So this is also printed out in one of your downloads after the session. First is an urgent need established. Again, with all of that competition for your donors' attention, you want to show that what you're doing is urgent. And there's no doubt that kids today are in crisis. There's no doubt that there are epidemics facing them, dropouts, obesity, all kinds of things that we are addressing. So you just need to establish it. Next, is your case for support message repeated across multiple channels? Does everyone know that you're increasing graduation rates? Is it on your webpage, in your letters, in your training materials? Do the staff have this? Do you tell what you achieve rather than just telling what you do? Is it emotionally compelling? And did you remember to establish that you need money, why, and how it will be used? You're asking for investment from that donor. Don't forget that part. It's really important. So give yourself 1 point for every yes answer. With no points, I'm going to start back over. Number 2, you're going to need to get to work. Or if you've got 1 point, you're going to need to get to work. 2, keep retooling. 3, you're getting there. Still a little room for improvement. The 4, you're almost there. And once you've got all 5 of those areas, you're ready to take that case for support out and go raise some big bucks for your club. I love this quote from Ted Bailey. The case for fundraising should aim high, provide perspective, arouse a sense of history, and convey a feeling of importance, relevance, and urgency, and have whatever stuff is needed to warm the heart and stir the mind. That's what we want for your case for support. There are resources for you to download. They're listed over in your, where you found the place to vote, under handouts, and each one of those you just click on the blue text and it'll download automatically onto your computer. At this time, I would love to address any questions that anyone has. We had a couple good questions starting out, but we'd love to answer any other questions that anyone has about their case for support, how to write it, how to use it, where to find research. I'd love nothing more than for us to all be able to have a phone conversation, but we all know clubs are noisy in the background, so everybody's on mute, unfortunately. Any questions at all? Anyone? Hey, there's one. Should we use a digital version? I think it would be a great idea to have both a print version and a digital version prepared. Because when someone asks you to just send them something by email, you've got it there and ready to go. Particularly if that can be mobile compatible, that would be fantastic. Also, if you've got it shared that way, it's going to be easy for you to take excerpts and put them onto your Facebook page or to put the whole thing up onto your web page. So why not have a digital version? I will say, although it can be nice to add pictures and color and things like that, it is not essential as long as the case for support is well written. So it's okay for this to be a pretty plain black and white document. Although when you're putting together brochures and things, that's where you might want to add some of the more bells and whistles if you can. More important that it be well written than that it be beautiful, although our friends in marketing would say both are equally important. Does anyone else have questions about the case for support? Oh, this is a great question. Tools and tips for collecting inspiring member stories from programming staff. There was one club that I went to that had their development folks just come in and spend an afternoon at the club talking to the kids. And they found one little girl whose mother had passed away and her older sister was 18. Her older sister was walking that little girl to the club every single day. The staff didn't even know about that until the development person was in there visiting with them. The club that I came from, what we used to do is ask each of the staff to just email us a sentence or two about a kid at their club. And then we would go out and visit with those kids. So, for example, there was a little girl named Jasmine, and Jasmine had been brought to the club. She joined the club after her father got custody of her. Jasmine was about 10 years old and not literate. Her mother had been a prostitute and not taking good care of her. That's probably pretty obvious. Within a year of being at the club, she was reading. She was getting C's, and her whole life had changed. Her attitude had changed. Everything about her had changed. I got the opportunity to visit with Jasmine because I was putting together something for my case for support, and that was just submitted by a staff member. So you could ask them to email you. You could do a contest. Submit, anybody who submits a good member story will draw for a McDonald's gift card or something like that. It brings up a great larger point too, which is if you are a resource development person and kind of removed from the club, it's important that you build relationships with those staff and with the kids to help build that culture of philanthropy throughout your club. And because it's going to help you with having those stories to tell folks, with knowing which kids would be great to have visit with donors, with getting great pictures and great stories. So an absolutely outstanding question, and thank you for asking it. Anybody else questions about putting together that case for support? Is there anyone who can take a look at and critique our case for support? You bet. Your director of organizational development would be a fantastic person to look at and critique your case for support. If you don't know who your DOD is, you can send me an email after this webinar and I will find out for you. Your CEO will also know who your DOD is, but if nobody can remember their name or you don't have their contact info, I would absolutely love to connect you with that person. Your DODs are a fantastic resource. They know lots about resource development and about organizational development, and they would be happy to critique your case for support. Great question. How can we maximize our advisory council and board in the case for support? Awesome question. You guys, these are great questions. A lot of times in resource development, we'll put things together, take them to a board meeting and say, here you go, here's our case for support. Here you go, here's our brochure. Here you go, here's our budget, here's our plan. But because our board and advisory councils are supposed to be our partners, it would make a lot more sense to have a conversation with those folks before you put the case together. What do you think are our community's most pressing needs? What do you think would be an inspiring story for the kids? You could share your draft with them and ask them to critique it. So getting them involved will result in more buy-in, will result in a new perspective outside of that of frontline fundraiser and bring it to community member, which is fantastic. And anytime you can get your board members more involved in parts of resource development that do not involve asking for money, you build up their abilities when it comes time to ask for money because they're more comfortable, they have a higher stake in the game, they feel better going out and soliciting when they've been asked to develop materials like this. So that's a great question, and I would encourage you to definitely involve them. Other folks? This webinar wins the prize for best questions from the audience so far, so thank you so much for that. You have in that question box, I'd like to invite you to do one more thing. In our Club RD, we have a monthly newsletter that we send out called RD Pro. It has articles, book reviews, links to trainings, and great resources online. And we'll send it to you each quarter if you're interested. Just type in your email address and I'll add you to the list. We would love to have more folks receiving this. Yes, the audio of the webinar will be available and you can absolutely share this with them. It's going to go up on fundraisingbank.org. It'll be up within a week And all of the webinars from this whole series are on fundraisingbank.org right now. Usually about a week lag time to get them put up there, but you could absolutely show the webinar at that point and share it with your board members. That's a great question, and I would love to have you do that. If you need help with that, or the audio isn't working or anything like that, you guys can always feel free to contact me. Here is my contact information. If there's something that you couldn't figure out the question box today, or you forgot to ask, anything like that about any of these webinars, that's what I'm here for. So there's my email address and my phone number too. You would be very welcome to email or call me anytime. So again, if you're interested in receiving that newsletter, just type your email address here in the chat box. In terms of finding a sample, there is going to be one that you can download right here to the person who asked that question. There's one called Exampletown Case for Support. Yeah, if you don't know if you've signed up for the newsletter or not, just feel free to put your name on there. That's no problem whatsoever. Okay, at this point, that concludes our webinar. Again, if you have any questions, please do feel free to reach out to me anytime. And I want to thank you all so much for being here today. Have a wonderful afternoon, and I wish you the best of luck with your persuasive and compelling case for support.